It was a tough day across the board for Louisiana baseball and softball against ULM. Let's recap game two here on Ragin Rundown. What's good, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into another episode here on Ragin Rundown, the show where you will know all things UL sports. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick, but you know you can always call me Fitz. And in today's episode, like I mentioned in the intro, we are recapping Louisiana Diamond Sports playing against ULM. Both programs losing a series in the same season since the 2001 season. It was a tough day for both squads. Baseball loses at home 7-3. Softball drops a 5-4 game in Monroe. And it was pretty much like what we talked about last night in the Friday night games. It was missed opportunities, costly innings, and that would lead to two losses on the day for both Ragin Cajun Diamond Sport teams. So we're going to start things off recapping baseball. And early on, you had a good game flow, right? Andrew Herman gets the start on the bump for you at pitcher. He's been in that role, assuming that role as your Saturday starter, and he gave you enough to be able to give you a chance to win. He goes 7 innings, allows just 3 earned runs. And then ULM is able to scratch across their first run there in the second on a sacrifice fly. And then Louisiana has a chance early there in the third. Donovan LaSalle doubles, and then I believe it was Jace LaCava that would be thrown out at home. Now, we know head coach Matt Diggs loves to be aggressive on the base paths. When it comes to stealing bases and stealing home and, double stealing and all these things like that. And him and Coach Allison Habits are kind of similar in those ways. They like to create chaos for the opposing defenses, and that's great. But I think that because offensively, the team has not been as good as what we would have expected, he may have expected. I feel like they're almost overcompensating in a lot of instances and putting themselves in a lot of bad situations where maybe instead of sending him home, you have a runner on second and third, and now you have a chance. Now, even though you haven't had the best approach at the plate, now you give a guy a chance. And I know obviously in the back of his head, he's thinking, well, I don't want to leave 2 runners stranded in scoring position. So it's like, he doesn't win on either side. And so I can understand that this is a difficult position to be in for him as a head coach and making that decision, especially with him being the one that's waving him around at the third baseline. But that was a huge missed opportunity very early on. So now we get to the middle innings, and that's where a shift starts to happen. The Cajuns finally break through there in the 5th. They get an RBI fielder's choice to tie the game at 1 apiece. And then there was a turning point there in the 6th where ULM had a power surge. Andrew Herman gives up 2 home runs, 2 solo home runs, which, I've heard a lot of ball coaches say that the solo homers don't hurt as bad because that's just one that you're giving away. It's the ones where it's 2 guys on and they get a 3-run homer, or it's a guy on and you get a 2-run homer. That's when it really can be damaging to you. But suddenly now you find yourself down 3-1. And again, because you've been struggling so mightily offensively, it almost seems like this is a hole that you wouldn't be able to dig yourself out of. But like we've seen the Cajuns do, or like they did earlier in the season, they responded with a solo home run of their own there in the 7th. Donovan LaSalle, again, a guy that has, when he's had his opportunities, he's been able to make plays. In the game, I believe Steven Spalita did not start at designated player. And if I had to guess, the reason that decision went down was not because he didn't play well, because he hit a 2-run homer the night before. I think that Coach Diggs was looking at how Josh Lim and Jace LaCava have been well in the outfield. And because Donovan LaSalle is an outfielder and he wanted to get his bat in the lineup with 2 guys that had been hitting extremely well, he decided to sub out Steven Spalita. And, obviously there's criticism there is to be brought to that decision because hindsight is 2020. We see it now that it didn't pan out necessarily the way that you would have wanted to in the end, and the result that you got, which was a loss. But when you're trying to find a way and you are responsible for hitting and you are the leader of the pack, you're just trying to find a way to get things going. and it didn't work out for them ultimately in the game. But it was not just because of that, but it was because of things further down the line. So we get to the back half of the game. You get to the eighth inning. ULM adds an insurance run on an RBI single. Steven Spalletta comes off the bench, and he gives you an RBI double that makes it a 4-3 game. So now you're sitting in a position, you're in striking distance, you have an opportunity. You're going into the ninth inning. Andrew Herman is out now at pitcher because he went those 7 innings, like what we talked about earlier. Now you have in Garrett Carter, and then he gives up a error happens to be able to open the door, an error from his glove. That is, and then after that, you have a 3-run homer that happens, and that would be the knockout punch. You go down 7-3, and then you go down quietly, swinging 3 straight strikeouts to lose the game and to lose the series. So you feel extremely disappointed because once again, you had opportunities there and you missed out on those chances, and you have the expectation that your bullpen would be able to hang on because throughout the season they've been able to do that, but they just don't get it done for a second straight game. And now you almost feel like you're in a spiral because nothing's working, right? The thing that had been your calling card, which was your pitching staff, is not pitching as well. Obviously, they're going against the best batting average in the conference, but they haven't been playing well. And on top of that, your offensive struggles are continuing. So right now, the Cajuns are in a very peculiar position because now you're saying, how do we find a way to win? There's only so many ways that you could get creative, changing the lineup, getting different guys in there, trying to find a way to get it done. But at the end of the day, like I said on Friday night, great teams that want to win championships find a way to do it. They find a way to execute. They find a way to come up big in those big moments. They find a way to throw strikeouts when they need to. They find a way to get the final out to be able to slam the door shut. And as of late, the Cajuns just have not been that team that we had seen them be early in the season. On the day, Donovan LaSalle was probably he was your best offensive weapon that you had outside of Steven Spalletta coming in to pinch hit with his RBI. Donovan LaSalle had 2 hits and 3 at bats, hit an RBI, and obviously that was his solo home run. Everyone else kind of struggled throughout the day. I believe Noah Lewis had a double, I think it was, early in the game, and then he had a few moments where he was able to steal some extra bases to get you in position. But it just wasn't a good day for you once again offensively. 7 hits for you in 31 at bats, 7 hits, 3 runs, 1 error, which was a major error that we mentioned about with a throw-in error coming there from Garrett Carter. And on top of that, you had 10 guys that you left on base. Again, it's hindsight is 2020. You're in position, you got guys in scoring position, and you would like for them to be a lot better, but they just weren't. The bullpen couldn't be able to hold you off after the great start that you had from Andrew Herman. The back end of the bullpen, Garrett Carter, J.R. Tollett weren't able to get it done in the end, and you had that one defensive mistake that ultimately changed things for you. So head tip to Andrew Herman for giving you an opportunity to have an winning effort, and then also give credit to ULM for having some timely, powerful hits to put you in a position where it was not your day and where you struggled mightily, and ultimately you dropped the series. So now the only thing that's left is Game 3 for you to salvage and hopefully not be swept for a second straight weekend in conference play, and to try to just leave with some form of dignity in saying that not only is this your in-state foe, but this is a team that you felt like that you could have been a lot better against, because while your pitching has been great, theirs has not been. And they have just found a way to shut you down. So the Cajuns have to find a way to get it done. They have to find a way to manufacture runs better. They have to find a way to have better approaches behind the dish and be more mature, like what Coach Diggs said on Friday night. And they have one more opportunity to do that against the Warhawks on Sunday at 1 p.m. So going to take a quick timeout. But coming up, we'll talk about Cajun softball, how they had their chances as well, but defensive issues, flipped the game early, and that would pretty much settle it for you. We'll break it all down when we come back here on Ragin Rundown. Hey guys, thank you so much for once again tuning in to an episode of Ragin Rundown. We're going to get back into the action in just a second, but before we do, please do me a favor, like this video, share it, and leave a comment down below. But most importantly, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're listening, please follow the podcast feed, rate the show, and leave us a review because that's going to help us get in front of more Ragin Cajun fans just like yourself. Ragin Cajun softball also dropping game 2 to the Warhawks. Their first time, again, losing in a series since 2001. And I believe it was their first time losing to them in Monroe the previous night since 2007. Again, this has been a series that you historically have dominated. And this season has proven, earlier before conference play got rolling, I said that if the Cajuns can fix these two things, which is to create better energy and get faster starts and have great pitching on the back end of things, that they would be able to dominate through the Sun Belt. And thus far, they have not been able to do that consistently. And that's why they're in the position that they are right now. So in this game, you were quiet in the first 2 innings for both teams. And then in the 3rd inning, the Cajuns would strike first. Mia Norwood gets an RBI double. Mia Lascano gets an RBI single. So now you take a 2-0 lead. Very similar to what you did on Friday night. You get some great momentum early. And that's great to have great momentum because like what we've talked about, when you're away from Lamson Park, you have to create your own energy because when you're in a hostile environment, it's harder to focus and have better energy. Coach Abbott said that she feels like there's less distractions. I feel like there's even more because you got people yelling at you. The crowd is ruckus. Anytime you make a mistake, any strikeout that you have, there's a lot more going on around you as a result of that, right? So you get the 2-0 lead, and then some disaster happens there in the 3rd where you have multiple defensive errors. You had 4 total in the game. ULM is able to capitalize on it. They had a 2-run double and then another 2-run double. 4 runs with only 2 of them being earned. And that swung the game very early. Now, kudos to Louisiana for responding because like what we've talked about with baseball and even with them as well, sometimes it's about being able to respond instantly. They come back in the 4th, they manufacture some runs. They did it with a little bit of small ball of, having some bunts and getting runners scored in and all of those things like that. And, last Monday, Coach Abbott's talked about how, she was tired of hearing people say to stop bunting. And I can understand where she comes from with that perspective, but I think that some of the execution that has been happening with the bunts that they're having is resulting in them having a lot of outs. I think that it was there in the 4th where it was a moment where a bunt was laid down and a runner gets tagged out in the instance. And sometimes those decisions can be able to cost you a game somewhere later down the line. Credit to her for continuing to stick to her guns, but, sometimes you have to find another way to do it. I think that it may have been in that inning where instead of, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Haley Hart that was up to bat. You had a runner on 2nd and 3rd. I'm remembering off the top of my head, and I should just check the notes of it. But Haley Hart was up to bat, and she laid down the bunt, and I'm thinking, man, Haley Hart has been your best player offensively. We've talked about it multiple times in different episodes of how great she has been for you offensively. In my mind, like I get the thought process behind the bunt, but I would also think that you trust this type of player to come up big in this moment, get a base hit, and bring in these 2 runs. Obviously, you were able to manufacture enough to tie the game, but who knows what could have happened if you let her stand there and swing. Maybe she hits a home run, and now it's a 3-run homer. We could be talking about a completely different instance. Now you could be playing for a rubber match on Sunday. But you felt like the momentum was shifting back in your favor because you were able to scrape across those 2 runs to tie it at 4. But then you get to the 5th inning, ULM gets an RBI double. They take the 5-4 lead. And then in the final 2 innings, the Cajuns would stall offensively. They only get 1 hit over the last 3 innings, and they lose the game. So the biggest thing from this, obviously, is the 4 errors that they had. And that is your biggest issue. And, last season, it was something they struggled with a lot. This season, as they're here in conference play, it's something that's slowly starting to become an issue for them. How you fix it, you got to just be able to have players that can make routine plays more often. If it's a pop up, they've got to make the catch. If it is a put out, they've got to be able to glove it. If it is, the ball is right there in front of you and you got to make the play at the plate, you've got to find a way to do it. Because again, like what I said about baseball, a championship team doesn't make excuses and say that, oh, my bad. They find a way to get it done. And that's what you have to be able to do in order to continue to compete in this conference and be ultimately where you say that you want to be. And then obviously you had one strong inning by ULM that caused a spiral for you, and then you couldn't capitalize late enough offensively to try to get back into the game. So you showed fight by tying the game up, but you weren't able to pull out the victory. Again, credit to ULM for capitalizing on every mistake that you made, because, again, that's what good teams are going to do. Right now, ULM in both baseball and softball is a better team than what the Cajuns are right now. That's what it is. And if they cannot turn it around, the gap will continue to grow further and further. Obviously, I know both coaches are frustrated, and I know the players are frustrated. They have to find ways to be able to do what their job is, whatever that may be, having a better approach behind the plate, throwing strikeouts, making routine plays, whatever that may be, they have to do those things. So from a big picture standpoint, both games, once again, had similar scripts. UL builds momentum. One bad inning flips everything, and it ultimately leads to a loss. So the defense hurt both teams. You had late game execution lacking therein, and you had missed opportunities. Obviously, baseball had 10 base runners left on, like we talked about, and then softball stranded some late in the ball game themselves. So this was a day where Louisiana didn't just get outplayed in innings or overall in this game. It was that in the key moments that they needed to be at their best, they just weren't. So game 3 for softball will be at noon out there in Monroe. Game 3 for baseball will be at 1 o'clock, and we will keep our eyes on that to see if the Cajuns are able to pull out a victory in either one of those games. So that's going to wrap up this episode here on Ragin Rundown. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much. Please do me a favor. Please like the video, share it, leave a comment down below. How bad was this loss in your opinion? Let me know down in the comments. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know when we're dropping game recaps and episodes just like this one. If you're listening on the podcast side, please listen again. Please follow the show, rate us, and leave us a review as well, because that's going to help us get in front of more Ragin' Cajun fans just like yourself. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick. We'll see you guys next time.